Hi, everybody. A little bit about myself. You may know me, you may not. I spent most of my adult life in Baltimore. I'm a longtime Baltimore City resident, which is important to the conversation today. And I also spent most of my adult career with WBAL television as the Chief Investigative Reporter, which means, if you know anything about television, you get around. So I am very familiar with the region and the disconnection in the region, which is the topic today. What I really want to talk about is how do we become better neighbors in the region, and to think about ourselves and where we are and our neighbors differently. So, when you go around the country or you go around and people ask, where are you from? I'll bet you probably say, oh, Baltimore, even though you're probably not from Baltimore. A lot of people do that. You don't say like Finksburg or Westminster. You probably say Baltimore. Why? Because it's familiar to people. But that's not the way we are set up in the Baltimore area. We are a disconnected collection of a city and individual counties with no relationship between us. No relationship for services, no relationship to share costs, no relationship to share revenues. We're a unique entity in that regard. So how did we get this way? Let's go back to history a little bit. 1850, yes, 175 years ago, the Maryland legislature divided the city and Baltimore County into two judicial districts, meaning city had its own courthouse and jail, county had its own courthouse and jail. And that started the divide between jurisdictions in the Baltimore area. Fast forward 100 years from then, 1948. 1948, voters approved an amendment to the Constitution that prevented Baltimore from growing physically, from annexing, which meant that now Baltimore is in this little, you look at the map, what is Baltimore? A little postage stamp, right? Okay, well, that's why. Because up until that time, Baltimore was annexing different areas, Roland Park in 1919 or something like that area. But this amendment stopped any kind of annexation for Baltimore City, so it couldn't grow. It couldn't grow physically. All over the country, you've got cities like Austin and Phoenix and, all over Nashville, all over the country, cities are growing in space, in size. Imagine in Baltimore if Baltimore City had continued to grow beyond what's now the Beltway. That's what other cities have done. Planners call them elastic cities. Baltimore is an inelastic city. It is confined to this little area. A couple of things happened in the 1950s that are very important to this conversation. One, the Supreme Court desegregated schools, Brown versus the Board of Education. That was 1954. Around the same time, the JFX was built, the Jones Falls Expressway. So now, you didn't have to live in the city to conveniently get to work in the city. The highway gave you the opportunity to get in and out fast. Somebody I know who lives in Ruxton in Baltimore County once boasted to me that he could get in his car in the morning, get on the JFX, go to his office, park in the garage in the office, go to the office, eat lunch in the lobby of the building, at the end of the day, go back in the garage, get in his car, go back to JFX and go home, and never set foot on a Baltimore City sidewalk. And that is also important to this conversation. Between 1950 and 1960, Lake Clifton High School in East Baltimore went from all white to all black, just like that. Edmondson Village in the west part of Baltimore, familiar with Edmondson Village? Along Route 40? Went from all white to all black from 1960 to 1970. Some very interesting things happened in Edmondson Village, which have to do with kind of robbing the black community from being able to grow wealth with a term called blockbusting. Have you ever heard that term? Blockbusting was a practice that was used by real estate speculators where they would move a black family onto the block to chase out the white family and buy the white family's property for cheap. Then turn around and get the black family into the same property for like double the price. Somebody that, I did a story on this when I worked in television, and one of the folks in the Edmondson Village neighborhood told me that when she moved into the neighborhood in the late 1960s, the white family next door was so eager to get out of the neighborhood, they moved out in the middle of the night. And why do I say that? Because this lays the foundation for the segregation and separation of Baltimore City from the rest of the region. Population loss has never stopped. I have to get my notes on these numbers because this is also important to the conversation. Between 1990 and 2023, this is the more recent period, the city's population has dropped by 23%. Baltimore County's population grew by 22%. Anne Arundel County, 39%. Harford County, 44%. Howard County, 77%. And Carroll County, 42%. Now, a lot of those folks are folks coming from the city and moving into the suburbs. And what happens? Those are taxpayers. So what do we have? We have this complete disparity in the cost of living between Baltimore City and the rest of the region. Why? Because its property tax rate is double everybody else's. Property tax rate in Baltimore City increased 15 times between the late 50s and the late 70s. Why? Because it was losing taxpayers to the suburbs. And now you can see with the increase in population in the surrounding jurisdictions. Baltimore and St. Louis are the only two cities in the country that have no connection to their surrounding areas. Pittsburgh is part of Allegheny County. Philadelphia is part of Philadelphia County. Nashville has a metropolitan police force, which covers Nashville and Davidson County, of which Nashville is a part. Miami is the county seat of Miami-Dade County, which is considered the 9th largest metropolitan area in the country. If we were considered a metropolitan area, we would be like the 7th largest metropolitan area in the country, but we're not. We are not considered a metropolitan area. We're considered a region, but only in name, because we have no connection between the city and the surrounding counties. So, some ideas. How do you start thinking differently about who we are and where we are, and to make us better neighbors in every sense of the word, to make us better neighbors? Okay, so some ideas. First of all, how about a regional magnet school? No, yes, really, you have magnet schools, but a regional magnet school on maybe a STEM school, maybe a regional STEM magnet school that would serve the entire region. Students from all over could attend this magnet school. One thing I've learned in all my years of reporting is that kids know one another regardless of where they live. And especially now, because they have social media and Instagram and everything else, and they connect. Doesn't matter where they live, they connect. And so this is just one way of bringing everybody in the same place to start thinking about a region as opposed to us and them. By the same token, how about a regional rec center? State-of-the-art rec center that could serve the region. Not just one jurisdiction or the other, but could really serve the region. And state-of-the-art. Not just sports and those kinds of activities, but drama and music and recording all in one place for kids who already know one another to all get together in the same place. Because the other thing I think some of this does is to also bring their parents together and to start to break down those barriers of, oh, I live in this county, or you live in that county, or you live in the city, and, never the twain shall meet. How about a regional transit authority? We don't have that, okay? We have the MTA. Many cities have a regional transit authority. Think SEPTA in Philadelphia. That is a regional transit authority. What would that do? Well, I think it would give the opportunity for the people who run the agency to have a better connection with the people they serve, as opposed to this state agency, which always feels like it's somewhat removed from the needs and the issues that face people who use the system in a particular area. We're already talking about a regional water authority. This is a big issue about, the city has the water system. We have all kinds of, iterations that go along with that. There is a task force that has been set up. This is really the only area where there's even a conversation about regional governance of something. There's a task force set up to think about how would we have a regional governance of our water system. This is, again, something that is done all over the country. So far, it has made little progress, but at least there is an effort in place. Like Nashville, as I just mentioned, a regional police department. This would be a big thing, obviously. Crime does not know a boundary. And we already have, between Baltimore and Baltimore County, we have a regional auto theft task force. It's actually been in place for a long time. There are dozens of opportunities for there to be better regional cooperation on the issue of public safety. It just doesn't make any sense in some cases that you would have separate police agencies in certain areas. And to have a much more regional approach, everybody's facing the same kinds of things, car theft, some areas have more concentrated crime than others, but there's all kinds of issues that people share. And to have a more regional cooperation on public safety may benefit everybody and probably save some money. Here's one. My friend Ron Cassie at Baltimore Magazine has actually written about this. He suggests tearing down the JFX, at least part of it. Why? I think it's at least the lower part, below North Avenue. Cities have done themselves harm, I think, Baltimore being one of them, to build highways right through them. Think of Atlanta, 75-85, splits the city. What does it do? It's a highway. Philadelphia, 95 separates Philadelphia from its waterfront. It's a big concrete speedway that people use to zoom in and out, and that's it. If you tore down part of it and made it more of a boulevard, it would give it a much more neighborly feel, a much better feel of actually seeing things around you as opposed to just zooming in and zooming out, which of course has been the way it is since the JFX was built. We already have a regional economy. And there is, if you're familiar at all with the organization of the Greater Baltimore Committee, the executive director of the Greater Baltimore Committee, Mark Anthony Thomas, is a huge proponent of greater regional cooperation and greater regional governance and initiative than we have now. And one of the reasons, as I mentioned before, is because when you become a more unified metropolitan area, you get to be a better economy, you get to have a bigger population, as opposed to all of these separate jurisdictions. Here's another kind of big idea, and this is something that, it's not my idea, this is something that people have written about and proposed, is a regional property tax rate. I mentioned to you before, Baltimore City's property tax rate is double everybody else. It's kind of silly, one size fits all. When you think about it, if you read some of the papers that have been written on this topic, it doesn't sound as bad as it sounds, like, oh my God, our taxes are going to go up. It would be a more level playing field for everyone, and there could be the opportunity for greater revenue sharing and services throughout the region. A Baltimore City math teacher actually wrote about this last year suggesting a statewide property tax rate. There is a property tax rate that's imposed by the state, but instead of your county rate, it would be a statewide property tax rate that would involve every jurisdiction, and again, have a much greater impact on a level playing field. One of the, when you talk about all of these things, and I have, done stories on them, I have worked on with different nonprofits, I've moderated panels on regionalism, et cetera. At the end of the day, what we really need to talk about, though, is attitude and perception. Just like I said about the guy, that I know that said, oh, I can, get in and out of the city and don't have to set foot in Baltimore City sidewalk, okay? That's really the first thing that has to change, is that we have to think about how we think about our neighbors. We have to change the way we think about our neighbors. It serves no good, and social media is full of this, to criticize Baltimore City leadership simply because they're Baltimore City leadership. It does no good to call somebody racist because of where they live. It does no good to continue to complain and complain and complain about our neighbors. I will bet, and somebody mentioned it earlier, I will bet we all claim ownership of the Baltimore Ravens and the Baltimore Orioles. They see their fan base in the region. They see a regional fan base. They don't see an individual county or city fan base. They consider themselves Baltimore. And if they can do that, we can also start to think of that way too. Thank you.